Feeling cold on keto? Well, I'm going to explain it so you get it once and for all. Coming right up. So let's break this down step by step and let's make it very, very simple. If you're feeling cold, and we're assuming that you're indoors in a controlled environment, if you're feeling cold, it's because you're not producing enough heat. And why would you not produce enough heat? Where does that come from? There's two reasons. One would be hypothyroid. If your thyroid is basically your thermostat, it's what makes a thyroid hormone that tells every cell in your body to crank up their action, to turn up the heat production, to turn up their activity. So if for any reason that you are hypothyroid, then that's going to turn down the thermostat. It's going to turn down the heat production. And even if you have plenty of fuel available, the cells just won't do anything with it. So check out that video on thyroid, hypothyroid that I did, and you'll get a lot of answers there. The other reason, besides hypothyroid, is if there's a fuel shortage. That if your body doesn't have access to fuel or doesn't think it have access to fuel or doesn't have enough fuel. So there's two basic reasons for that. One would be that you have plenty of fuel, but that you don't have access. You can't get to it. It's locked away. And the second one is that you're actually running low on fuel. You just don't have enough, and the body perceives a shortage. So let's talk about fat, because fat is your energy reserve. That's your fuel reserve. You're walking around with a tank of fuel on your body as fat reserves. So someone who's relatively lean, like myself, I have about 100,000 calories of fuel reserves on my body, in fat alone. I have a little bit more in protein and other tissues, but 100,000 in fat. That's about 30 pounds. So I weigh about 185. I'm about 15% body fat, maybe a little bit less these days, give or take. Or it could be a 150-pound person with about 20% body fat, still pretty lean. Then on the other end of the scale would be someone who has maybe 150 pounds of fat. That'd be a 300-pound person who has 50% body fat. And 50% body fat is not as rare as you might think. Most people that we check, even people who don't look overweight, are going to end up somewhere around 35 to 40% body fat. So we have a lot of calories, we have a lot of fuel reserves on our bodies. And that's for survival purposes. That's why the body packs on the fat, because the person with the more fat can survive a starvation longer. And historically, that was a really good thing, because in the wintertime or during periods of starvation, the really skinny people would die off, and the people who are better at storing fat, they would survive. So humans have developed the ability to store fat really well as a survival advantage. But if you can't get to that fuel, if you have all that fuel, but you can't get to it, if it's locked away, it's inaccessible, this is what happens with insulin resistance. Insulin is a fat storage hormone. It creates a pressure to push that fat inside the cells, and you don't have access to it. Even though you have all that fat, it just won't be available to come out of the cells and to be burned as fuel. So now, as long as if you're on a high carb, if you have insulin resistance and you keep eating high carb, now you're still going to be warm because you're topping off your blood sugar. You still keep filling up the fuel, you keep packing it away, but you keep adding more so you have enough. But now you have the bright idea to restrict calories. You want to lose some weight, so you follow the popular advice of eat less. So they say it's all about portion control and calories. Well, it's not. Because once you have insulin resistance and you restrict calories, now your body senses that, hey, I need 2,000 calories for my metabolic needs to keep the heat production up, but you're only feeding me 1,500, so I'm 500 short. I don't have the fuel that I need, so I'm going to turn down the thermostat. And this is what happens when we crash metabolism through calorie restriction in the presence of insulin resistance. And that's what happens to most people, because most people are insulin resistant. Their insulin is packing the fat away. Now they start eating less. They can't get to the fat. So even in the midst of plenty, even with an abundance of fuel reserves, your body is starving. It only has that 1500, so it's going to turn down the thermostat and you get cold. If you are trying keto and you feel cold, you're probably not fat adapted yet. Because if you're truly in ketosis, if you are burning fat, then the ketones, being in ketosis, producing ketones, is the evidence that you're good at burning fat. That means in ketosis you do have access to these fuel reserves. And even if you start eating less, your body says, okay, I need 2,000 calories, and you're only eating 1,500, no problem. I know where to get it. I'm fat adapted. I know where there's several 100,000 calories sitting around. I'll just get it from the fuel stores. So if you're fully fat adapted and not insulin resistant, you can eat less without turning down the thermostat, without crashing your metabolism, because your body doesn't care where you get the calories. It doesn't care if you eat them or if you can burn them from existing stores. And that's why keto works, and that's why if you're truly in ketosis, then you're not going to crash your metabolism. You're not going to turn down that thermostat just because you eat a little bit less. And the beauty of keto, the beauty of being fat adapted, is that you don't get hungry because your body knows, hey, if you don't eat, I'll just get it over here. Okay? The other reason is an actual lack. So at some point, a lot of people, they get so enamored with ketosis and they feel so good doing it and they get in a certain routine, so they lose the weight and lose the weight. But it comes a point where they don't really need to lose any more weight, such as myself. And if I skip a few meals, it's usually no big deal. But if I go for a week and only eat one meal a day or so, then my body starts getting a little cold. It starts turning down and saying, hey, feed us a little bit more, because the body is starting to sense that maybe we're taking this fat burning a little too far. Maybe we're getting a little too close to that edge of survival. It's like we're not dying yet, but we'd like to have just a little bit more fat reserves just in case there's a long starvation ahead. So if the body starts sensing that it's getting kind of close to the end of the fuel reserves, then it's also going to cut down, it's going to turn down that thermostat and you start feeling cold. So the solution obviously is, if you don't have access to the fuel, then get fat adapted. Now you just learn enough about this, you get some way of testing yourself, you start counting your carbs carefully, and you make sure that you get into ketosis. Probably get down under 20 grams or so for a solid week and see what happens. And if you are getting down to or below your desired weight, then make sure that you eat enough. Okay, you can stay on keto, but you may not want to stay on one meal a day anymore, because it's just really difficult to eat that much. If your body needs 2,000 calories, it's kind of hard to eat that in a single meal sometimes. So at that point, I'd probably suggest that you spread out your feeding window a little bit. You stay low carb, but you don't have to follow all the rules for weight loss anymore. You can still stay in ketosis, you can still be low carb, you can still feed your brain the good fuel, but the rules have changed a little bit. You're not needing to lose the weight, you need to eat enough to meet your metabolic needs. So I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if this works for you. Let me know your experiences. If you have additional comments or questions or suggestions with videos, let me know that as well, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at that. Share this video with as many people as you can, because we need to get clarity on how these things work. We need to understand the basics. So the more that you can share this with other people, the more you can enhance their quality of life. Thanks for watching.